Please, 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 God, can this recording not shut off again? Please, bro. Please, bro. I will do anything, bro. A lot of things, not anything. Dude, I filmed this video twice already. This is my third time. The first time I was filming, the power went out. But I have a generator, so it turned right back on, okay? So I'm 11 minutes into the video, it shuts off, I'm irritated, it's whatever. I'm filming the second time. My computer screen refreshes. I don't know why that's still happening, but it is. That made the recording freeze, and it wouldn't not unfreeze. So I have to redo it again for the third time, bro. The third time. Okay? So, if I'm not in the most uppity mood ever, that's why, bro. This is my third time talking about the same thing, okay? So, yeah, man. I mean, let's get into it for the third time. So today we're covering the PD arrays I haven't talked about yet. I've already talked about fair value gaps. Today we're going to talk about inverse fair value gaps. We're going to talk about order blocks, and we're going to talk about breaker blocks. And then from there, we're going to talk about how I use PD arrays to decide order flow. Me personally, how I personally do it, okay? So if someone else is like, you're not doing it right, I don't care. This is how I do it, and this is how I've always done it, and it works for me, okay? So we're going to get into it. The first thing we're going to talk about is inverse fair value gaps. I mean, you can already see it on the freaking screen. I'm really trying my best to not, fully punch my monitor right now. So let's just get into it, bro. So, right here, you see we have a bearish fair value gap. We've talked about fair value gaps before. It's the gap between the first candle's low and the bottom candle's, or the third candle's high. Between the wicks, the gap between the wicks. That is a fair value gap. Okay, so as you'd imagine, an inverse fair value gap is when we inverse that gap. A lot of people ask when they first learn about inverse gaps if poking above the gap makes it inverse. No, the candle has to close above the gap. It has to close above it like this. If it doesn't close above and it just wicks above, that doesn't mean anything. Okay. The only other way that we can inverse a fair value gap without getting a close above it is if we go above the third candle. So 1, 2, 3, if we go above the first candle, this fair value gap is invalidated. That's the only way. But your typical scenario is going to be a candle closure above the inverse gap, okay? So this is a bullish inverse fair value gap because we had a bearish fair value gap and we closed above it. That makes us a bullish inverse fair value gap, so it's expected to support price now to the upside. Okay, it's pretty cut and dry. There's nothing really crazy to it. As long as you understand fair value gaps, like we talked about from the previous lessons, this shouldn't be too hard to understand. So obviously a bearish scenario is going to be the opposite. Candle 1, candle 2, candle 3. The gap between candle 1 and candle 3 is right here. There's your inverse gap, or there's your fair value gap. Then we get a bearish candle that closes below it. That turns this into a bearish inverse fair value gap. So it's expected to hold price down. Okay? Like I said, pretty simple. Whenever I show a PD array, a lot of people ask what makes a certain PD array high probability. What I'm about to show you right now is what makes any PD array high probability. Okay? So, in this scenario, assume this right here is a key level. Okay? So this line right here is a key level. And this line right here is a drawn liquidity. Bro, what is all that noise? Only look on the left side. So this is a drawn liquidity. This is a high time frame key level. Okay? So we displace to the downside and tap this key level. And then from the tap of that key level, we got displacement that inversed a bearish PD array. So disrespected a bearish PD array and now created a bullish inverse fair value gap. That makes it high probability because there's a drawn liquidity to the upside that we're chasing, and we also just came from a key level. So that will always make it high probability. Now, the same goes for a bearish scenario. So what makes a bearish inverse fair value gap high probability? Imagine this is the drawn liquidity down here, and this is a key level up here. So we just displaced into a key level, got a reversal from it that was strong enough to disrespect a bullish PD array because this was a bullish fair value gap. The close below it disrespects it and turns it into a bearish PD array because a bearish inverse fair value gap is expected to support price down. That's what makes it high probability. We have a draw on liquidity. We came from a key level. There was another thing that I was going to say that I'm kind of blanking on. Oh my God, why am I blanking? Please. Oh, something that a lot of people get confused is an inverse fair value gap is not a draw on liquidity like how a fair value gap is. So like this inverse fair value gap, it's not like an inverse fair value gap needs to get filled like how a fair value gap does. You know what I mean? So it's not a draw on liquidity. Like if you see an inverse fair value gap, you shouldn't be like, okay, we should be trading to this inverse fair value gap. That's not a thing. It's not a draw on liquidity. It is just a place that price shouldn't disrespect if you're going to maintain bearish here and maintain bullish here. Okay? No, an inverse gap is not the same as a BPR. No, it's not. No, it pretty much isn't. So, now let's look at examples of an inverse gap. No, the inverse doesn't have to be a fair value gap. But when the inverse is a fair value gap, then it's a BPR. The gap that has a gap on both sides is a BPR. I'll cover BPRs right now really quickly, but I'm not going to go show a ton of examples or anything like that because I don't specifically use BPRs. I don't look at the charts and look for BPR. So I'm not going to do a full breakdown on it, but we'll cover it right now. Okay? So, actually, I'll just show on the charts. We're going to go look for inverse gap examples. I'll show on the charts. So, you are not my father. And on everybody, I just can't. All right, hold on. So, let's look for a good one. If you got a bonbon, then shake it. Okay, so this push up came into this order block. So there's your key level. Then from the key level, and we have a drawn liquidity lower down here, which is previous day's low. If you don't know what drawn liquidity is yet, don't worry about it. We're going to cover it. But the market wants to go to this level right here. That's our drawn liquidity. This order block is our key level. We push into the key level, got a displacement from it, and this candle closed below this fair value gap. Then you see we pull back into that and then get a displacement. That is how inverse fair value gaps are used. Dang, what are we sending in the chat, dude? She sent her RN license in response to a BPR. What is your obsession with retracements, bro? They're not used for retracements. It's a place where you can... Okay. I think I know what you're asking. I think I know what you mean. But yes, so in this scenario, if you want to go short and we get a retracement into the inverse value gap, it's a good place to look for shorts. I wouldn't refer to it as a place to use for retracements. That's what a PD array is. A PD array is a point of interest for an entry, or at least that's how I view it. Fair value gaps, inverse gaps, order blocks, breakers, those are places where you look for entries or look for reversals or continuations. So when we inverse this gap, yeah, I guess to answer your question, yeah, I guess it's used for retracements. I've just never heard it referred to as something like that. But yeah, when we do pull back, it's a place to look for an entry. So the fact that this gap got inversed, when we pull back into it, because it's expected to support price or to send price lower, it's a place to look for an entry because this is where price should get sent lower. So this is a bearish scenario. Let's find a bullish scenario. What if it inverses but there's more fair value gaps? So like this scenario. That's where I use the fib. Like, this isn't an entry I would have took, but it's an inverse fair value gap that held. So when there's multiple fair value gaps like this, I'm usually waiting for the final fair value gap on the leg to get inverse before I enter. And I'm also looking for OTE to get disrespected, like how I showed in the fib class. I'm not usually entering on the first fair value gap. I just used that because it was the first example I saw that showed the inverse being used. Okay. So let's go to today. This is a good example. 5-minute fair value gap. This right here is a 1 hour fair value gap. So we push down into a key level, like how I showed you guys in the examples. Disrespecting 0.79 is disrespecting OTE. But on this example right here, we pushed into the key levels, and then we have a draw on liquidity to the upside, which is this hourly fair value gap. This line right here is an hourly fair value gap. So we come up, this candle closes above this gap. I guess it books before we pull into the inverse, but you see the inverse hold anyways. So we did end up booking this, but you still see we pull into this inverse gap, and it supports price to the upside. We tap back into that hourly fair value gap, and then we go. Do I enter when a premium fair value gap gets inversed? If order flow allows it, which we're going to talk about after I show the PD raise. Okay, so that was a bullish example. I want to find like a textbook example though. You are not my father. So you highlight the fair value gap that gets inversed as the point of interest, not the candles that inverse it. I'm be honest, I'm not really sure what you mean. I highlight the fair value gap, and yeah, I look at this because it's the inverse fair value gap. The inverse fair value gap is the point of interest. Are you asking if I would enter on the candle close? Is that what you're asking? Look at what's on your screen. Okay, I'm looking. You highlight the big black candle. No, I didn't. I highlighted the fair value gap. Why is it not used as liquidity? Because in order for us to inverse a fair value gap, that literally requires us to fill the imbalance that was there. So it's not an imbalance, and it's not a place of liquidity. That is the only reason why the market moves. So it's not a draw. But Ariana, I still don't really know what you're asking. So I'm highlighting the fair value gap. You know what a fair value gap is. Okay. All right. How do you enter off inverse fair value gaps? You put your limit order on it. I'll show 1 minute examples in a second. I mean like when you close above it. So with inverse fair value gaps for entries, I enter on the candle close if it allows a good risk to reward. So let's find a good example. Like on the 1 minute, it's easier to spot. There's just more examples. So here, this inverse, if this candle close right here that inverse the gap allows a good risk to reward to your stop loss, like let's say you wanted it here or something, and it allows a good risk to reward to your drawn liquidity, then you can take it. For me, this wasn't good enough. I want like a 1.5 at least. So I entered on the gap, and that gave me a 1.6. like the bare minimum I'll take risk to reward wise. So if it allows a good risk to reward, then enter on the candle close. If it doesn't, then wait for the inverse. That's what I do. And I can't. I just can't. Alright. Let's just look at a few more examples. So if there's multiple fair value gaps and they get inverse, you enter off the retracement with the fib. If you're referring to what I showed you earlier, that's not what I was showing you. But sometimes, yeah, I do enter off a retracement with the fib. But more often than not, you're entering on wherever the inverse is. But in this scenario that we talked about, where there's fair value gaps here, and this one got inversed, I'm typically not entering on that first inverse. I'm usually waiting for OTE to get disrespected. But no, on actual entries, no, I'm not waiting for a fib retrace. I'm entering on the inverse. So this gap got inversed. I'm not putting a fib tool up anywhere. Price is balanced below this inverse fair value gap and this 1 minute fair value gap. So there's no reason for us to go any lower if we are going to long. So I can enter off this inverse fair value gap. I'm not using any fibs. I put stops below the order block because we didn't tap into the body. So I didn't want to get stopped out on something stupid because I just wanted to have a tight stop loss for no reason. So that's where I entered. That's where I put my stop loss. That's where I took profit. If we trade above the 0.79, I'm not entering as soon as it closes on the 0.79. I'm just saying when we do that, I consider the range disrespected, and then I look for an entry. It's case by case. Yeah, like today. That's exactly what this was. I got in before the 0.79 got disrespected just because what we were doing was so abundantly bullish that I didn't need to wait. But like here, when we traded above the 0.79, I added. Like it was on the second chart, but there was a super fire place to add on the second chart after we traded above the 0.79, so I added here. And that was after we came out of this fair value gap. And then we displaced, we're above the 0.79, I added in this 1 minute fair value gap. And then from here, we just immediately went to my take profit. Okay. So now, let's look at a couple more examples, but this is taking a little longer than I planned on, so we'll just do like one more example of each direction. Why is there like nothing here? Okay. This low was an SMT on a yes, or with a yes. So from this sweep and from that SMT, we got displacement, and that displacement inversed this 1 minute fair value gap, and the only other 1 minute fair value gap on this bearish price leg is all the way up here, way above the 0.79. So if we are going to be bullish, you can feel comfortable entering here, especially since we filled this fair value gap and got displacement from it. So this candle closure wouldn't allow for a good risk to reward. So do you enter on the candle closure? No. You enter at the inverse. I would have put stops below the order block. First TP at the highs, last TP wherever the draw on liquidity is. Can we have an anatomy class? On FaceTime, sure. Anyways. Oh yeah, I'll do a class. I'll do a class for pyramiding. I don't do it too often, to be honest, but But yeah, that's a bullish example. Let's find one more bearish example. Actually, there's a, let me see. I just ain't, I mean, this is an example of waiting for the last fair value gap on the price leg to get inversed. So this candle closure inverse this bullish fair value gap, turns it into a bearish inverse fair value gap. We tap into it. Notice how we don't close above it, but we wick above it. That means it's still valid. And then from there, that sends us to what I think was previous day's low. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, this was previous day's low. So previous day's low was your draw on liquidity. Previous day high sweep was your key level. We swept that key level, got displacement to the downside, inverse this gap. This gap held price, sent us previous day's low. Okay? Not really that complicated, I'm gonna be honest. Why does price retrace into it? Because that's just what price does. We're not gonna go straight down. We're never just gonna just shoot straight. We get retracements, and the retracements are typically a form of manipulation. So every movement in the opposite direction of where the market actually wants to go is a form of manipulation. Why is it specifically respected? ICT, I'm pretty sure ICT said that the levels of the fair value gap are still marked in the algorithm. It sounds really corny, but they're still marked in the algorithm. So price treats them as a place to be respected because they're still embedded in the algorithm. That's what he said. It sounds really corny. I don't really know anything else outside of that, but all I know is that they work. So yeah, he got kidnapped by the Govy, bro. But yeah, so that's inverse value gaps. If that didn't make them understood in your brain, just rewatch the video because it's not that complex. But now we are going to talk about order blocks. And my computer just froze, and I swear to God, if it messes up the recording, I'm going to crash out. It better not mess up the recording, bro. Oh, wait, no, my mouse just died. All right, fire. Alright. This is going to be really annoying now, but let's do it. So now we're going to do order blocks. I just can't. I just can't. Look. Okay, so it's the exact same scenario as to what makes it higher probability as the inverse fair value gap. So this candle right here, consider each leg a candle closure. Okay, so act like this is a bearish candle that closed. This is a bearish candle close. This is a bullish candle close, bearish candle close, bullish candle close, just to make it simple. Okay, so this bearish candle went into a key level. Then from that key level, we pushed out and had a bullish candle closure above the bearish candle. That candle is an order block, okay? Something that I do that I'm be honest, I don't even know if it's necessarily correct, is I also view this as an order block. So, I mean, we tapped into the order block. This is technically called a propulsion block, but don't worry about that. But it's in the middle. It's an order block that's in the middle of a price leg. A lot of people don't consider that an order block. I definitely do. Price respects it all the time. So I refer to it as an order block. But pretty much in a bullish scenario, I refer to an order block as the last down candle before the candle closure up. It froze. No, it didn't. I refer to it as the last down candle before a candle closure up. So here's the last down candle before the closure up. This here's the last down candle before the closure up. I consider both of those order blocks. A lot of people don't agree with that. And maybe it has a different name. All I know is that it supports price. So this is a bullish order block right here. So obviously, the opposite would be a bearish. So last candle close up before the candle closed down. This candle closed down, turns this into an order block. The order block is expected to send price down. This order block is expected to send price up. Okay, there's a few things that come with order blocks. So typically, if we trade into an order block and get a candle close below the halfway point, the order block is more than likely going to fail. So obviously the same thing for the other end. And when it comes to entering on order blocks, if I ever enter on an order block, it's always right on it. And then I just put stops below the order block. I never wait for reactions. I never do anything like that. There was something else I was going to say. Oh, I mean, for it to be invalidated, obviously any push below the order block invalidates the order block. So you don't need a candle closure below to invalidate this. Any price below the order block invalidates it. There was something else I wanted to cover. What was it? It wasn't that important, so it's not a big deal. But yeah, those are the main factors of order blocks. So we can go look at examples real quick. And I'm not going to do order flow today. I'm not going to lie. There's just not going to be enough time. I thought I would, but is it useless without a fair value gap? No. All right. I just can't look back. Okay. Oh, another thing to talk about too is it's not just one candle. So like in a scenario like this where you have 4 consecutive bullish candles before the move down, this is all considered an order block. So, and keep in mind, like I said, it has to be a candle closure to turn into an order block. So these 4 candles went up. This candle closure below the bottom wick of this bullish sequence turned this into an order block. If it just wicked below, it would not be an order block. But it had a candle closure below, and then we got to retrace into the order block, and then we displace from the order block. So it's a bearish scenario. It's a bearish order block. Okay. So now let's find a bullish order block. Why not? I don't look. Major Marcello, all I see is nose. Okay, so we push down, get a sweep of previous day's liquidity, and then we get a displacement to the upside. The retraces, they go below the halfway point, but do they get a candle closure below the halfway point? No. So this order block ended up supporting price twice and sending us up. I guess I should talk about conceptually the idea of what order blocks are. So the idea, as far as I understand, is in order for price to go down to form a bearish candle, sellers had to get in the market, right? So sellers got in the market to get this move down, and then we had the candle close above that move. So whenever we pull back into this set of orders, because they're in drawdown, they want to mitigate their orders around break even. So order blocks are just a form of mitigation. The people who sold here after we got the push up are now in drawdown and are looking to mitigate their orders at break even or somewhere around it. So conceptually, that's the whole idea behind order blocks. Like I say every single time, knowing conceptually why the things work is nice. It's not necessarily the most important thing. As long as you understand what's supposed to happen there, that's all that really matters. But yeah, you should know that at least. So there's a bullish and bearish example. I'll show one more example of each. So let's look. All I see is numbers. Oh, I want to find a really clean one. What is all that noise, bro? If it closes below the first bearish candle, it's invalid. the halfway point. It's not invalid if it closes below the halfway point of all of them. It's just way less probable. The only time an order block is invalidated is when we go below it or go above it in a bear scenario. Okay. Nope. I'm just looking for really textbook examples so it's clean. Here's one. Okay. Another thing to note too is that with order blocks, typically you're seeing the reaction off the body, not the wick. But I mark the entire thing always, and I pay attention to the entire thing always. So here, this candle closes above this down candle. This is the last down candle before the move up. See how we have this down candle, but we wick above it? So it's not an order block. Down candle, move up, close above it. We pull back into the order block, stay above the halfway point, and then get displacement. And then obviously end up taking out all these highs. Do I limit order wicks? If I'm entering on the 1 minute, yeah. So now let's find another bearish example. Yay. The last up candle before this move down, we get a close below the wick. We retrace. I mean, I guess that's above the halfway point, but like barely. And like I said, closing above the halfway point doesn't invalidate it. It just makes it less probable. But still, we pull up into it, respect it, and then take out this low. And then we even pull into it again, and then obviously make it push lower. So pretty simple stuff, nothing crazy. Breaker blocks are going to be the most complex. So we'll get into that. I messed that up. Why does that feel so off? It did close above it. I said it did. Wait, is that an OB or not? Yeah, those are the ones that I'm talking about, where it's not like at a low or at a high. It's in the middle of a price leg. I still personally consider those order blocks, and I still expect them to support price. A lot of people don't like that I do that, but it's worked for me. Works pretty consistently. But yeah, I mean, do as you please. Okay, so now here's breaker blocks. For a bullish breaker block, keep the sentence in your brain, okay? High, high, low, higher, high. Low, high, lower, low, higher, high. That is a breaker. Low, high, lower, low, higher, high. This right here is your breaker. Just like every other example, like I told you, the high probability setup is always going to be pushing to key level, trading towards strong liquidity. So here, there's a short-term low, and then we push down, sweep that short-term low, tap into that key level, and they get a displacement that closes above this price leg, the last price leg up before the move down. This right here is a breaker block. So it's expected to support price. So then obviously the same thing for a bearish scenario. We have a short-term low. We trade down, sweep it, tap into a key level, displace, get a candle closure below this low. It's expected to send price down. Okay, so it's not much else I can really say. That's what the pattern is. So let's go look at on-chart examples. Keeps freezing. Okay, so here, for example, bro, what are we doing? Bro, why is it? Jesus Christ. All right, so here, so this is another thing that I do that people find to be controversial, but it objectively is an order block. So this singular candle I consider a breaker block because every candle has a low and a high. So like I showed you in the drawing, it's low, high, lower low, higher high. So here we have low, we have high. It's the last up candle before the move down. Then we have a lower low that sweeps the short-term low and sweeps this level of liquidity. Then this candle closes above that. That turns this into a breaker. And then you notice we turn into the breaker and then we displace away from it. So it's supported price. That is a bullish breaker block. Low, high, lower low into the equal low sweep. Displacement with the close above, breaker. Does it always have an order block? I mean, I don't know. It doesn't really matter though. So now let's do a bearish example. We'll go to the 1 minute so it's easier to find examples. Okay, so this push was into the 1 hour order block or the 1 hour for value gap, also taking out this short-term high. This right here is the last move down before that move up. There is a candle right here, but this was the last move down before the start of the move up. This one's in the middle of the price leg, so I'd be watching this as the breaker. I'd mainly be watching the last candle though. I mean, I've seen a lot of people do it different. For me, I'm normally watching the last candle on the price leg down. I've seen people look at the entire thing, but I'm looking at the last candle on the price leg down. So I mean, you see it here again. So high, low, higher high, lower low with this candle closure. Pull back into the breaker, respect the halfway point of it, and then displace. Do I trade off breakers? Yes. Everything I show, I use. That's why I didn't show BPRs, because I don't use BPRs. Why is the low next to it not a breaker? To the left or to the right? Well, because this is part of the price leg down. Yeah, I mean, it would be considered a breaker. It just wouldn't. I wouldn't consider it a 1 minute breaker. It would probably be a breaker on the second charts because we have the high, the low, the higher high, and the lower low. It would be considered a breaker, but it's a breaker on the second charts. I mean, regardless, it got respected though. Okay, I mean, it's not really that complicated. When it comes to PD arrays, it's literally just pattern trading. Like, it's all patterns, so it's not super complicated. I show you guys what the pattern is. We look at it a couple times. You get some practice by yourself. You'll get it. It's nothing crazy. Let's find another example. I want to find another bullish example. Oh. We don't pull into any though. We form breakers here, we're just not pulling into them, so it's not good for an example. Yeah, I mean, this is an example of the breakers that I call breakers that people don't like. Right here. So we got low, high, lower low into the sweep, higher high with this candle closure, pull into the breaker, and then push away. It's really slow, but still support a price and push it away. But it's not like a textbook example, so I want to find something better. Who's calling me? Alright. Do I use mitigation blocks? No. The first price leg up for bullish breakers. It's the last price leg up. So let's find a bullish example. We've only been going down, so it's kind of hard, but yeah, so like this entire price leg is technically the breaker, but me personally, I'm only paying attention to the candle right here. So we do have low, high, lower low, higher high with this candle closure, pull back into the breaker, and then displace and take out this high. So it's the last up candle before the move down. You can look at breakers like failed order blocks. You can, and I do, and that's the one that people get mad at me for, is when it's just a singular candle. So like if this was just one bullish candle and then these were two black ones or two bearish candles, people don't like that I consider this a breaker, but I do. So in that scenario, when it's just one candle, you can kind of consider it a failed order block, but don't forget that you need the candle closure above. Yeah, like this one right here is one that people get mad at me for. This is like a textbook example. So this is just a candle. It's just an up close candle before the move down. But we still have low, high, lower low, higher high with this candle closure. And then we pull back into the breaker, respect it, and then displace to the upside. But in this scenario, because we got the candle close above this high as well, this would also be considered a breaker. Oh, wait. Right here. So this would also be considered the breaker because we did have a candle close above that one too. So it would be low, high, lower low, higher high, and then we push into it and go. But yeah, I mean, breakers seem to complicate people a lot. Just remember the pattern I showed you. Low, high, lower low, higher high. The candle close above forms that up price leg before the move down as the breaker. It's expected to support price. I mean, I don't like that one because it's not the candle that made the low. The candle to the left, like the wick didn't even make a low on that candle. You know what I mean? But the candle to the left made a low. The best examples are the ones that I showed you that are like full on price legs. Those are always going to be better but I still consider when it's just a singular candle, I still consider it a breaker, because it is a breaker. It's just not a breaker on this time frame. Like this, I mean, if you're going by like the technicalities, because it's supposed to be a price leg up. This isn't really like a price leg. It's just one candle. But if you were to go to like the 15-second chart, this would be a price leg to the upside before the move down. So that's why I always consider it a breaker, and I always look at it anyways, because it is a breaker. It's just not a breaker on this time frame. But yeah, I mean, don't overcomplicate yourself. If this type of breaker is not making sense to you, then just focus on the first examples I was showing you, because those are like the textbook examples. No. Or, hold on. No. You're like making me feel complicated now. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's really sloppy looking, and I have no context. But yeah, it's low, high. We made a lower low, then that candle close made a higher high, and then yeah. So I mean, it counts as a breaker. But like I told you, I pay attention typically to the last candle, the last up candle. In a bullish scenario, it's just a wick. The lower low just needs to be a wick. Yeah, that's all I'm going to cover today. I didn't think that was going to take as long as it did. If you still feel complicated on it or whatever, just rewatch the video and ask questions. But does anyone in the Discord have any more questions before I go? I'm not going to lie, I'm also super tired, so I feel like that kind of affected my efficiency, but it's whatever. Is breaker the most strong confluence? It's two of the strongest confluences for reversal in the marketplace. All right. Homework I'll ping everyone and send in the chat. But it's always going to be just finding a bullish and bearish example of everything we talked about. So find a bullish and bearish example of every PDRA we talked about today. And that's it. But yeah. YouTube, we're out. Deuces. I can barely even think right now. Have a great day.